quite often we're guilty of, when we've got to find out a solution or a problem, we want to Google it. We just go, let's go to the computer, let's go to the web, and let's find out a solution. But critical thinking goes beyond that. And this is what we need to break that mold and start critically thinking. So what does it mean? And what we're going to cover today. So why we use critical thinking? Why is it important to us? What does it involve? What do we have to do to actually critical think? What are some of the strategies that we can use? What are the outputs? What are the outcomes? What are the results of using critical thinking? That's really important to understand, especially in the management context. And how this relates to learning. Critical thinking is part of lifelong learning, so we'd need to understand the relativity of that to learning. The importance of critical thinking, and if you haven't got the gist of it by now, it's pretty important to management problem solving. And then we take it into a practical application. Okay, so again, this is very key to matching the management theories that we've been learning throughout our studies and putting it into a practical context. And lastly, how does this relate to me now? So that's you. So how does it relate to this unit and your studies right now? So let's get started, but before, we're going to stop and think. A little quote by Albert Einstein. So education is not the learning of facts, but training the mind to think. So that's very much what that cartoon was about initially. We're retraining our mind to think. So often in education, we're learning and then we're assessed by exams and assessments, and we move on, and we don't actually get to think. We don't get to meditate on what we've learned and actually think about how we can apply it. So this is what the critical thinking helps us do, to stop and think about it. So why do we use critical thinking? Well, there's multiple views, and critical thinking is about getting those multiple views, getting different views, comparing those different views, looking at different aspects of those views, how people think about particular issues in a different way. And by recognizing those other views, we're actually starting that critical thinking. Critical thinking isn't about being negative. Sometimes we play the devil's advocate, which is when you can actually think about what could possibly go wrong, but it's not actually about being negative all the time. So when we use critical thinking, we develop and we draw conclusions from evidence. So we're looking at what is actually happening, and we're looking at qualitative, quantitative, we're looking at the different aspects, we're looking at crystallizing it, looking at different perspectives to actually come out with some good evidence, and from that draw some conclusions. So we're gathering various views, multiple views, a diversity of views, and the information that those different views gives us. And that's all about that management problem. So what it actually comes about to is giving us a more effective view, giving us a broader view and a good point to start looking at our management problem. So what does critical thinking involve? Well, it enables us to think. Okay, it gives us time to think. It gives us time to gather that information and start creating a better pool of ideas and a better idea of what's happening. Recently, somebody said to me, it's about taking your backpack, okay, filling up your backpack with all those different ideas, so that when you actually go forward, you've got a lovely big backpack full of ideas. So that enables that thinking by looking and getting those diverse ideas and different points of view. It prevents us from jumping to immediate solution. Very often, when we talk about problem solving, people jump to solutions. But you can't jump to a solution unless you've actually looked at the problem, looked at the evidence, looked at the root causes, tried to understand what's actually happening. Is the problem actually the problem, or is it the way we're viewing that problem? Okay, so jumping to an immediate solution, if we use critical thinking, that prevents us from doing that. It gives us that time to actually look at those diverse views. And it also helps us to evaluate information, analyze it, review it, see what is actually happening with that problem. And it depends on that actual problem which is happening. Just recently, when I came to do a recording, I walked into the studio and there was maintenance happening. So I had a problem. I had a management problem. I had to get this recording done, but all of a sudden the studio that I was about to use was under maintenance. So we needed to evaluate the information. So the technology guy, the IT expert, He and I actually talked about it, what was the problem, how we could get around it, what I needed and what time I had to do the recording and how he could facilitate it. So we immediately went into a critical thinking mode to actually evaluate the information we have and come up with a reasonable way forward. So that was our best way forward. We negotiated. I went away for half an hour, did some other work. He took my mobile phone number, called me when it was ready to happen, and I came down and things got underway. So he gets to do his maintenance, I get to do my recording. It's a win-win. So that was our appropriate solution for this. I had to go away and think about something else to do for about half an hour while he had the maintenance time to actually fix up the studio so I could proceed with the recording. So were there better ways in this situation? Well, depending on what the information. If I wasn't going away tomorrow, then there would have been another alternative. I could have come back next week. There wouldn't have been the rush to actually make it happen now. But for this situation, that was the best way that we came across. Another better way might have been me coming back later in the day. But through gathering that information, that's what we came up with this particular management problem. So when we look at a management problem and use that critical thinking, we're looking at the what. What is happening? How is it happening? When is it happening? The context, the situation. Why is it happening? Why is this problem actually occurring? And who's involved in the problem? Who are the stakeholders? And quite often we go back to why. You can keep asking yourself why. There's a theory about asking 5 whys on every particular issue. So why is it happening? Why is it a problem? And so on. So this is about linking theory to the practice, the lens that we actually use. So critical thinking actually gives us a lens to actually look at problems and look at those multiple views, look at the diversity of the views and gathering different information, gathering other points of view. What happens when we critically think? Well, we start to form a logical and comprehensive view. So that's a good thing, right? Okay, particularly when we're trying to present a management problem and we're presenting that problem to our boss, or we're being paid lots of money as a consultant to actually bring up some solutions and resolutions to issues. So if we start to create a logical and comprehensive view and not just sort of say, this is what I think, it's more than what I think, I actually have evidence, I have data, I have information, I've looked at alternatives. So that gives us a logical and comprehensive view. And that's when after we've evaluated and analysed those other views, and that leads to that logical and comprehensive view. We look at different sides, both sides of the story. It's a little bit like when you're talking to your friends and you're discussing somebody, and perhaps a friend's broken up with their boyfriend or a marriage is broken up. And we're empathetic to our friend and we feel sorry for our friend and we're on our friend's side, but there's always going to be another side to that story. So it's important to acknowledge that. Crystallizes the view. Okay, this is one of my favorite theories, is about crystallization. And if you think about a crystal, different lights refract and the refractions come, the different colors, the different views. I look at a crystal and I'm going to see it in a particular way at a particular time. You come along, look at that crystal, you're looking at it from a different angle, a different time of day, and you're going to see something else. So crystallizing that view of the problem is a really good way to actually analyze it. Okay, I love to trip over my words. So we're assessing the facts, the ideas, the concepts, those conceptual levels that we bring to that problem. And by looking at those facts, ideas and concepts, we come back to that first point about forming a logical and comprehensive view. And justifying the view, the lens, the pathway taken. So by looking at those multiple views, we do start to justify why we are actually taking this particular lens and looking at the problem through that particular lens. And from that lens, we start to look at what pathways we can take. And in your reports, you'll be starting to look at those pathways in those 4 key areas of management. So it questions our assumptions. Quite often when you're getting other people's points of view, go back to the breakup of a marriage or a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, whatever relationship breaking up, there's always going to be another side. So when we actually do take the time to listen to the other side, we question our assumptions. Those assumptions that we've made on that particular scenario, in this case a relationship, they could actually be questioned. Okay, we might not have the same view after we understand that there's another point of view on it. So this gives us a deep approach to problem solving. And a deeper approach is going to give us a better solution and better pathways forward. So how does this relate to your level of learning? Well, we're going to have a look at Bloom's taxonomy. Okay, so it's about knowledge, recalling information. And then it's about the comprehension, understanding that information. So relating that to the information you're getting from the different views, those opposing views, those other assumptions, and comprehension, understanding and acknowledging them. And applying them, utilizing that information in your problem-solving process. Then analysis, breaking that information into categories, themes or parts. And we do that naturally. Once we start to gather information, we start to see common threads happening. We start to see common issues happening. We start to see consistencies happening. And quite often that will give us our pathway forward. And particularly from the lens that we actually bring to the situation. And this is part of synthesizing. So reorganizing that material that we've got, that information and those positions, those views. And this can help us create new ideas and new concepts. And finally, evaluation. Judgments are made with the information or ideas, and that can be as a whole or as a part. So that evaluation is gathering all that information from that synthesis, and it flows on from the synthesis of how we actually integrate it and come out with that evaluation. So this is actually Bloom's taxonomy, which is a learning theory, and critical thinking is actually very much related to lifelong learning. So this is how it actually can link in to your management problem solving. So why is critical thinking important? Well, if we haven't convinced you enough now, it's very much about the practical and the professional environment. So we're bringing in our theories, we're thinking about what we actually do, we're taking the time and we're evaluating, we're gathering information, and we're using a lens and a framework to actually look at bringing the professional and the practical together. So believe it or not, this is one of the key attributes that employees look for these days, is critical thinking. It's one of the key things that you will need to actually prove in your employability. So critical thinking in the employment place, in your workplace, is very key to your success, okay? It's a vital attribute that you can have as a manager. The better you are at critical thinking, the better you are at management problem, the better you are at decision making. So as I mentioned before, we start to develop lifelong learning, and critical thinking is important to everyday life, which is quite logical. If we develop our critical thinking through lifelong learning, this is going to affect our everyday life, making better decisions, looking at problems, creating better solutions, creating win-win solutions. So we start to think creatively and innovatively, and we keep on talking about outside the box. So imagine that box, and we're going outside it. Normally we've been sitting in that box like the cartoon said at the beginning, where we can just run to that box, literally, and click on a button and find a solution. And that solution might not be the best one. So with critical thinking, we're actually going outside the box, literally outside the computer, and trying to find a better solution. So by doing that, we broaden our view and our understanding. And critical thinking is needed in your higher education. Whenever you do an essay or a report, most of the body of it is critical evaluation, critical analysis, and your critical thinking to lead into a good, solid, credible argument. So it develops our judgment, evaluates information, and definitely helps our problem-solving abilities. The learning outcomes of critical thinking. And as we have here, the thinker, okay. Well, understanding of the importance. So what we've actually tried to accomplish in this session is understanding the importance of critical thinking, looking at the potential, all those possibilities that critical thinking can give us. We're recognizing and being aware of other views, other points of view, the diversity. In your group, you're going to have different cultures, you're going to have different genders, different ages, and that brings those other views because they're bringing their assumptions and their mental models with them. So this helps to provide a pathway, better pathways to more effective and appropriate problem solving. And this relates to learning, as we've looked at Bloom's taxonomy and how that actually can link into our lifeline learning and affecting the way that we live every day. So it's about reflecting on your ideas, talking to others, and in this case, your group. So that's some of the key learnings that critical thinking can give you and what we've tried to emphasize in this session today. So thanks for listening, and I look forward to talking to you soon.